or session 6 of the OD and Change course. What we have done or looked at so far uh, is there on your screen. I hope you can see. We've covered uh, a wide range of the content, beginning from spending some time on defining what organization change is, looking at the different components of the organization using the 7S framework by McKinsey Consultancy. Uh, we also, tried to understand why organizations change, or why should they change, and when organizations should change, types of organization change, readiness, organization culture we've spent time on. We've looked at the structure. We've also looked at what are the individual responses to change, you know, and uh, and then we looked at a couple of models of change. One at the individual level, which was the Kurt Lewin's model, and John Cotter's model, which looks at the organization level sort of change. All right, so this is where we are. Do we have any questions before I jump into today's session? You can either unmute yourself
Yeah,
or just type in the message.
yeah. No questions as of now. Thank you.
Okay. So let's assume we all have a fair understanding of all the things that we've covered over the last 5 sessions. So, what we look at today is communicating change, or what sort of communication should take place when any change initiative is being contemplated, and then we will try and kind of you know see the big picture and run through the general sequence of events, right? So as of until now, we've looked at organization change from a more conceptual standpoint, although we've had some discussions on the applicability or the application aspects of what we are learning. So after we look at communicating change, we will run through the entire sequence. So starting from scratch, and I'll share a particular case study that I was personally involved in along with a colleague of mine. So I will use that case study to run the general sequence of events. And then depending on how we are doing on time, I'll briefly, talk about organization development, which we will anyway do in the final session next week. All right. So this is what I have planned for today. So these are the two models of change that we've looked at over the last couple of weeks, right? So one is the Kurt Lewin's model of individual change, which talks about unfreezing, changing, and refreezing. And the analogy that we had used was of an ice cube. So you unfreeze the ice cube by taking it out of the freezer, applying some heat, and then introducing any change into that ice cube, which has now become liquid in water form. So you add some flavor, you add some color, whatever you need to do, and then you refreeze it, put it back in the fridge, crystallize it. Uh, so the idea of Kurt Lewin's model is that you go through 3 stages, right, before the new behavior or the new sort of attitude or the new values are sort of crystallized. And then we looked at last week we looked at John Cotter's 8-step model of change, which seems to be inspired by Kurt Lewin's 3-stage model, and those the large groups of activities are color coded in the John Cotter model. Like creating the climate for change is sort of analogous to unfreezing. Enabling and engaging and enabling the organization is analogous to changing, and implementing and sustaining for changes the refreezing part. The basic idea is, okay, so now that you've made some changes, how do you ensure that those changes become part of everyday life, right? So these are the two models we've looked at. uh, we will spend more time looking at some practical aspects or application aspects of these two models as we go along today. So, just a quick note about models and frameworks, right? So, you probably in every other course that you're doing in this program or otherwise, you're always going to be coming across models and frameworks and conceptual ideas and things like that. So, what is the value of all these models and how do you see them? So, one thing is that these models are frameworks that try to describe in the ideal situation. It's like uh, when you are checking out a new to buy a new motorbike or a two wheeler or a four wheeler. You're looking at the mileage, and there is always going to be this little fine print that says under ideal conditions, right? So it is 80 kilometers per liter under ideal conditions. And so these models also have a similar flavor to them, in the sense like this is how it progresses under ideal conditions. But we all know the real world, things are rarely ideal. You're never going to be in a situation where everything is going to fall in place, and so you will have to make some changes and adjustments. And a model or a framework also has a certain use in terms of being able to help you conceptualize or make sense of a particular problem, and it gives you the contours, the skeleton of it. A lot of the adding of the flesh or trying to you know uh, pack in uh, items into that framework depends largely on you and things that you gain through experience and further learning. So let's take this example of these paper clips, right? So we are all familiar with paper clips. They have a certain shape, they are meant to do certain things, which is they're supposed to be paper clips. You're meant to clip papers. And then you also have something called binder clips, right? So these are larger ones, and you use them to clip large stacks of paper, right? So if on the paper clip on the left hand side allows you to maybe clip about 10 sheets of paper, the one on the right, the binder clip, allows you to hold at least 50 or 100 pages depending on the size of these binder clips. And they have their own advantages, and they also have certain limitations. So for example, uh, this sort of paper clip neatly kind of arranges your stack of paper, versus the binder clips, while they can hold a lot more, also have this problem that they skew the stacking, right? So they make stacking a little bit uneven. And also, depending on how creative you are, you can put these same models and frameworks to use in other places. So, for example, when we were looking at individual responses to change, particularly the Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's five-stage process of dealing with change, I mentioned that Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed that five-stage framework when she was working with uh, patients, patients terminally ill, with terminal illness. So but then uh, the application of that particular five-stage framework was seen in other places as well. So anytime an individual is faced with something that is of a huge magnitude and affects them in a large way is analogous to a sort of terminal illness, right? So the kind of shock and denial in the entire process of anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So similarly, about these, to come back to the paper clips that we have on screen, you can use a simple paper clip to clean out your hairbrush, to opening an envelope, to cleaning your nails, as a hair clip. It is entirely up to how creatively you can use that particular model or framework, as a keychain, to hang a clip. I mean, there are at least 100 or 200 different ways in which you can use a humble paper clip other than for clipping papers, right? Similarly, the binder, the binder clip can be used to organize yourself, uh, to hold up your phone if you don't have a dedicated stand, and also to stack up bottles neatly in your refrigerator, right? So the reason why I'm kind of spending some time talking about these models and frameworks is to not become one too caught up on the framework, in the sense expecting that everything that happens neatly according to that framework. The second aspect is to be creative with the use of the framework. So just because a framework gives you 8 steps, there's nothing that stops you from adding another step or to reducing a step should the context demand, right? So that usually comes with experience, where you can play around with a particular model or a framework. All right, so let's jump into communication. Now, one of the big things about uh, any change event is, what do people know about that change, how do they get to know about that change, and what sense do they make of that change. That is from the perspective of the receiver. From the perspective of the person who is initiating the change, it is, what do I know about this change, what do I know about, or what do I think I know about what people receiving this change know about it? How am I going to package this change? How am I going to deliver this change? How am I going to ensure that people understand this change the way I want it to be understood? Right. So, I, in this case, is a leader or a manager who is trying to push this particular change. Right. So, uh, as we talk about this communication strategy, I'd like you to kind of keep in mind, in the background, okay, over here it's going to be on the screen for you, both these models of change that we've been talking about, right? So Kurt Lewin's and John Cotter's, to see like where, uh, you know, a particular communication strategy would fit in, in which part of the model. So largely, there are 5 aspects to a communication strategy, and these 5 items are straight from the reading material assigned to you. I didn't want to you know bring in any other different perspective, because these 5 points do a fairly good job of covering what a good communication strategy should be during an organization change, during the organization change process. First up is, you should build a strategy. So you think about the entire change process, because you're the puppeteer sort of, in this particular case. You need to have the big picture right from the starting point to the end point. If you can think of it as a flow chart, uh, you need to be able to have that flow chart in place. So you need to understand everything, and so understanding the big picture allows you to create or build a strategy for that particular change event or initiative. And then the second aspect is to involve key stakeholders in the communication effort, because one of the most critical aspects of communication is to involve the people who will either drive the change or be impacted by the change. Not involving these key stakeholders usually lead to problems, right? So because uh, you do remember from our previous sessions discussions about individual responses to change and resistance to change, when I'm not involved in the discussion about change that will impact me, I resist it simply because I don't know what that change entails. But if I'm involved in the discussions, because I'm aware of what that change entails, my resistance is going to be lower. My buy in is going to be higher. My acceptance levels of that change is going to be higher. So, involving key stakeholders is important. Determining the content, what is the exact content of that change? We look at those things in a little more detail. Uh, Related to determining the message content is also identifying what's the most appropriate communication channel for delivering a particular message, and then following up. Communication is always about closing the loop. If I say something, I stop and check for understanding, check for feedback. So let me do that now and say, I'll pause for about a bit, and then see if you have any questions about the five aspects of this communication strategy or the models that we have talked about. You can unmute yourself or use the chat feature to uh, post your questions or your comments. Okay, so we have one person who says it's clear, and okay, all right. So let's jump into each of these five different aspects, right? So building a strategy. Again, I'm taking everything from the reading material that has been assigned to you. So what I would recommend strongly is that you go and reread that particular document. It's a fairly good a guide for organization change. I would encourage all of you to keep it with you as a reference material whenever you are embarking on any change initiative. So first up is building a strategy. The basic idea is, you know, trying to make sure that we understand what we are trying to do. Okay, so what are we trying to do over here? And so these set of questions allow you to become to gain more clarity about this whole change thing that you yourself are trying to do, right? So for example, what do we need to accomplish? What's my current state? What's my desired state? Answering these questions will help you come up with the content that you would need for the other stages in the communication strategy, in terms of like how will you write the content. If I know what my current state is, desired state is, and all those things, I will be able to create more useful and meaningful content, right? Next is, what do we need to communicate? Who relays which messages? With whom do we need to communicate, right? So who will be responsible for communicating what, and who are the different types of people we will need to talk to? So in an organization, depending on the particular organization type you're in, you could either have a very hierarchical system, or you can have a flatter organization structure. But still, you are going to have different constituencies within your organization, either functionally or geographically or in terms of job roles. So each of them will have to have received some sort of communication from you about the change. more so if they are going to be impacted by that change, even more so if that impact has some negative implications or consequences, right? In what order do we communicate with our audience? Who gets it first, right? Top leadership, the janitor, or the peon, the clerks, whoever, right? So what is the order? What is the frequency? What are the channels that we will use? So this particular checklist sort of thing helps you come up with the content that will, one, not only help you with your communication strategy, but also help you with understanding your change initiative itself, right? So one of the first things you do is, whenever you think of initiating some change, or if your leader or your manager comes up with this idea that we need to change X, Y, or Z in this company, immediately throw this question set to them and say, like, hey, let's see if we can answer all these questions. If we can answer all these questions and we have good responses for them, then we know we are in a good position to start implementing the change or working on the change process. All right, right. So this is something that you can uh, fairly understandable. There is nothing over here that's conceptually difficult to understand. So I'm not going to go through every one of them, um, except that this is a necessary step in the implementation process, right? The next step is involving key stakeholders in communication efforts. So who will we involve? Who will be involved, right? First of all, have you identified all the stakeholders, right? So the stakeholders need not be only within the organization. They could be stakeholders outside the organization, like your vendors, suppliers, maybe customers, uh, maybe the government agencies of one kind or the other, right? Or some international partners that you have. Anyone, all your stakeholders will need to be identified, and you will have to think through what this change means to each of these stakeholders, right? So once you've done that, you'll know how to start involving them, and should you involve them also. And again, over here, this particular slide talks about HR a lot. Typically, in any sort of change initiative, the head of HR or some HR manager ends up becoming the coordinator. So typically that's the practice. Uh, while that is fine to some extent, it's always good to have someone from the line, the COO, or some line manager, line leader, who can at the very higher levels, who will be part of this team that will come up and build this communication strategy or work on communication. Because if only HR is doing it, uh, what we see is buy-in from the line side is usually a little weak or poor. Again, this is from your management guide handbook. What this particular slide asks you is, like, it asks you to check three other uh, you know items in the appendix of this particular document. I'm not going to go through all three of them, but let's just look at the first one, the template for building a communication strategy. This particular document is very, very intuitive. It's fairly simple to understand and very useful as well, right? So this is not, although this template says communication strategy template, uh, I would actually wouldn't mind using this to understand the change process itself for my organization, right? So again, let's just quickly go through each of these boxes over here. uh, so the target audience, so who is the target for this particular communication? You say this is the top management team. This is the middle management team. This is a group of suppliers. This is a group of my employees, say the sales for the or the tech team or the operations team or the HR team. This could be the housekeeping staff. This could be the receptionist, the group of people who handle communications. It can be anything, really. But every target has to be identified, and you will have to come up with uh, slightly different ways of approaching them, because what appeals to the top management need not appeal to someone at another level within the organization, right? Or what is relevant for a supplier or a vendor need not be relevant for your customer, and so on. So again, a set of questions that help you understand not only the change process itself, but also the communication that you will have to kind of be engaging with. Target audience. Who do we communicate with? What do they know or understand already? What drives, motivates them, right? So what drives and motivates your CEO is going to be different from your salesperson to your service person to someone on the shop floor, whatever, right? And then, what is your desired state? What is your desired state? What is the future that you envision? What do we need to accomplish? So what is the current state, what is the desired state? And then, based on the information that you get from this, you do a gap analysis to say, what do we need to do? What is the gap? I need to become an organization that serves customers in 20 cities. Currently, I'm serving 2 cities. So the gap is I need to expand my capabilities to be able to offer my services to 18 additional cities, right? So that involves a whole bunch of things that I will have to do. Measures of success, right? So how will I know that I've succeeded? What does success look like? So for example, if someone were to ask you, hey, I'm going to build a house, how will that house look like? Architects nowadays use computer aided design software to give you a look and even a walkthrough of your new house or apartment. How will you know you've met it? If what you see on the ground matches the design that you were given by the architect at the beginning, right? uh, how are performance measured? What are the key messages you will give to this particular target audience? What do we need to communicate? What is it that we are changing? What is the elevator pitch? The elevator pitch simply is something that uh, can you have a communication blurb that you can get across within an elevator ride. An elevator ride probably lasts about 30 seconds, a minute. And if you're in a 100-story building, maybe 5 minutes. But can I reduce my communication of the particular change that I'm talking about to such an extent, to simplify it to such an extent that I can actually deliver it within a few seconds or a few minutes? Communication channels, how will I get across? We will look at those channels in a little bit. And frequency, how often should I communicate? Who will communicate it? When they will communicate it? How they will communicate? Right. So this particular template is fairly useful in wrapping your head around uh, you know what you need to communicate when you need to communicate. Once you have the content in place, you have to start writing the content now, right? Writing the content in the sense, uh, what is the exact message that will go to the uh, zonal managers, for example? What is the exact communication that will go to the line managers? What is the exact communication that will go to some different geographical location? Again, that management guide has some useful set of questions that will provide you with or help you generate that the content for the message, right? uh, so when you're working on your the content, you'll have to figure out whether you understand the rationale for the change, and if that message that you have crafted, right, it could be a letter, it could be an email. When I say letter, it could be a physical letter that is given out to employees, it could be an email, it could be a video address by the leader, it could be an audio address, it could be a message that goes out as a text message on people's phones, it could be an app that is developed and people are asked to download, it could be on the website, it could be, handouts, brochures, whatever, right? So whatever you send out, what goes into that content, and that content, you should be able to see if it answers these questions, right? Does it give reasons for the change and explain the benefit of what this change will entail, you know and does it ask people, what is expected of them, it is one thing to talk about the change, but you also will have to tell them what are you expecting them, either in terms of uh, changes in the behavior, changes in the way you think, and changes in the way you what you value, what your attitudes are towards that particular change. uh, and in that particular content, provide as many details as possible, because one of the things that you'll have to remember, and one, be cognizant of and remember, is that uh, whenever a communication goes out, people are only going to be focused on how that particular change is going to impact them, right? And when it's negative, they become a little more or a lot more concerned. So when a general message goes out, if a particular group in your organization is not addressed, you can expect that that particular group will have issues and problems. All right. So they're probably the ones who might raise more questions, because one, they're concerned about their jobs and their livelihood. So it's a fair expectation that they will be the ones who will be making a lot more of the noise, so to say. All right. Supply realistic detail of both positives and negatives. Let the employees know that the organization understands the range of emotions associated with the change. And this range of emotions we've already looked at in the last couple of sessions, the individual responses and the emotions that people go through when they are told about a particular change. And so your message has to be able to uh, one, figure out in advance all the different responses and reactions that you can expect from within the organization, and have a response for it, right? uh, because that is what is going to help you in getting this change communicated relatively more smoothly. So once we have the message content, the next step is to identify the appropriate or the most effective channel through which we can communicate this, right? And for that to happen, you'll need to take a look at your organization from within to see, like, hey, do I have the infrastructure and the resources uh, of the different channels? If for example, I need to communicate something as a video message from, say, the chairman or the MD or the vice president or the CEO or whoever. Now, if I have to send out a video message, do I have the infrastructure to first of all create that video message? What would it take? Is it something that I can do from within the organization, or do I have to hire uh, from outside to have this video made? And what is the kind of content that will go into the video? Everything from what color shirt the CEO will be wearing when this video message goes out. Okay. And again, use that communication strategy template to figure out the target audience and what is the message content, the frequency, and so on. So the some of the different communication channels that you can use, the advantages and disadvantages are available, listed on the screen there. One is, you do a general mass communication, an email blast, or a little blurb via your intranet, send some memos, newsletters, put something on a bulletin board, uh, send some SMSs in bulk. One is, main advantage is that you reach a large number of people more efficiently at a lower cost. But then, because it's impersonal, people are going to be, like I said, the moment they read something, they're going to look at, is my department going to be affected by this? Is my job going to be affected by this? If that communication does not address these concerns, I'm going to get worked up. I'm going to go talk to my to whoever I can find, my friends, my colleagues, and then rumors start spreading, and then uh, anyone with a mischievous intent can easily kind of spread wrong information. The entire WhatsApp ecosystem seems to thrive on that in the current state of, like, the world now. Is anyone who has even the slightest inkling about something shoots off a meme or a message and then creates havoc for those who kind of read that message and don't know how to make sense of it, right? So advantages and disadvantages of different types. Then you have your face-to-face communications. You have one-on-one meetings. You can have group meetings. You can have town halls, information sessions, roundtable discussions, focus groups, anything where that allows you to talk to people and have an exchange. The mass communication route is one way, right? It's purely a monologue from the leader to the people or the stakeholders. It could be within or outside the organization. It's one way. It's a monologue, just kind of like an information dump. Take this thing. But in a face-to-face exchange, there is exchange, right? So you have opportunities to convey to people what the change is about, and also you have opportunities to address any questions and concerns they might have then and there, right? uh, and what happens also in when there is exchange is that people are more likely to buy into anything that you're trying to tell them, because they've had an opportunity to be heard. When people don't have an opportunity to be heard is when they start, you'll see organizations where suddenly employees go on mass strike. They en masse apply for casual leave, or they have a sit down strike or a tool down strike or a pen down strike, you know go slow strike, uh, all sorts of efforts in order to stall the work. One of the downsides of the face-to-face communication is it's time consuming, it's expensive, because you have to fly people in from different parts of the this one, if you're a multi-location organization. And some of them uh, may be apprehensive about voicing their concerns, especially when a top leader is there. And if that top leader is some sort of a, authoritarian or an autocrat, or has a more directive style of leadership, people tend to stay quiet because they don't want to raise the hackles over there, and then they don't want to be identified as the one who asked the one question that made the leader or the manager uncomfortable. And depending on the organization's culture, it can work both ways. In more open progressive organizations, questions are seen as a way to identify problems and to solve them in more traditional closed sort of organizations or organization cultures where the leader is very insecure. A question is seen as a threat to that particular leadership. There are also cultural aspects to this, in the sense more Western companies. When I say Western, I'm mostly referring to American companies. They have a fairly open. The opportunities to exchange is relatively more easier, as opposed to, say, even an organization in India, where people still will kind of uh, because of the hierarchical nature, not just within the organization, but also socially, because the society is so hierarchically structured. There is a great reluctance to question people at the higher social levels or organization levels. Right. So uh, uh, you will have to take a call on which of these channels is appropriate for the content that you are trying to communicate. The final step is to ensure follow up, which is again, this particular text is from the management guide. So the language is, it has department and faculty, because it's from that university. Uh, uh, that is the focus of that particular guide. But you can just substitute department and faculty with any group within your organization, right? So uh, once you've finished communicating, and you'll have to figure out how to get feedback. Have people understood it? What is the impact of that particular communication? Are people behaving, or have they changed their behavior because of this communication that we have seen? All right. Okay, so that with that, we kind of have covered the communication strategy point. Again, uh, very conceptual. In a little bit, I'll kind of give a little more practical application information as well. Right. So let me pause for a while and just consider these five aspects of the communication strategy, and let me know if you understand it. If you have any questions, you have any concerns, I can always go back and address something, or I can give you an example to make something clearer. So let me stop for a second now. Okay, so let's move on. So now we've covered quite a bit, right? So we've spent a lot of time looking at the fundamentals of organization change, what it is, why we have to do it, when you have to do it, what are the different types of change. We've looked at organization culture, structure. We've looked at individual responses to change, resistance to change. We've looked at the two models of change. We've also looked at communication strategy. Now let's see if we can put all of this together, right? So say here you are, uh, your CEO comes to you and kind of tells you, "Hey, buddy, we have this problem, and we need to kind of make some changes in the organization. I want you to lead that particular effort." Right? So the CEO throws that challenge to you, and you have to pick it up and run with it. how do you run with it? Okay, so what we'll do is we'll see if we can uh, list down the series of things that we will have to do in order to make that change happen. All right. And in the background, we will keep both the models in mind as our as guidelines, right? So uh, something that we will use to fall back on, both the Kurt Lewin's model and the John Cotter's model. And over here, what I'm going to do is share with you a case study. Uh, I'm going to make some. I've made some changes to the information that I will share about the case study because of confidentiality agreements that we have with the company. Uh, so I will make lots of changes to ensure that the identity of that company is protected and a lot of their information is protected. Uh, so you can kind of consider this as based on a true story, right? With a lot of creative license taken to make changes. All right. So this particular company that I'm going to talk to you about uh, is in the logistics sector. Uh, they are in the truck transport business. They use trucks to transport goods from one place to another within the country. It's a fairly small player, and so they are trying to move from a traditional transporter to someone who wants to be more customer focused, right? A transporter is more concerned with just getting goods from A to B. A more customer focused transport company wants to look at the entire movement of the goods from the perspective of the customer. So let's say the old company, we'll just call it trucking company, and then the changes that they want to see in that particular company is we'll just call it truck X, right? Like FedEx sort of thing. Truck X. Maybe I should kind of copyright that name and use it for something. Uh, so, quick background about the traditional trucking business. A traditional trucker, if you go to any of the mandis in any city or town that you're in, you'll have these huge trucks that come in, the lorries, and if you want to send something to them, you go and book your consignment with them, and your consignment will sit on that truck, assuming it's a non-perishable item. It will sit on that truck until that truck is full, right? So the lorry or the truck will not leave your town or your city until it is full, right? So which means you can book your consignment today and it will get shipped out only after a week or a 10 days, depending on what kind of business that trucking company has. And then it kind of ships it off to wherever it needs to go, to another city. Say I'm in Bangalore, I kind of put something in and I send it off to Delhi, right? And Delhi travel time, depending on earlier back in the day, it used to be several more days. Now trucking companies can and because the trucks are also of a better quality now, are able to reach Delhi in about 3 days or 72 hours or so. And so there is 1 day for you to book the consignment, 1 day for delivery. So roughly about 5 days is the process, right, of getting it from Bangalore to Delhi. Now, in a normal trucking company, the booking the consignment will probably be half a day, but then it will sit in that truck for anywhere from the same day to 10 days until the truck is loaded, gets driven for 3 days, offloaded in Delhi, and then given to you, or you're asked to come and pick it up from the transport company's office. Now, the change that this particular company wants is to be able to give the customer a definite time when they will deliver the package, just like your Amazon does, right? So your Amazon tells you you can expect your package between this and this hour on a particular date, depending on the type of shipping you choose, whether you're a Prime member or a regular member, standard shipping, whatever. Now, that's a big change for this particular company because it requires a big change in the mindset. The mindset change is that the person who books the consignment is not looking at it from, okay, the customer comes in and I am doing the customer a favor by accepting his consignment. You move from that mindset to kind of seeing the customer as someone who's going to be paying your salary at the end of the month, because it's the customer's payment that ends up as my salary at the end of the month. And so the attitude change, the behavior change, the mindset change is very different uh, in the new way of doing it, that is in TruckX. And also, I'm giving them a definite time. I'm saying, if you book a consignment with me today, I will have it delivered in your office in Delhi within 5 days, because it takes me a day to get the packages ready, 3 days for transport, and 1 day in Delhi to get it out to your office. Right? Big change. Now, how do you go about doing this? So, first of all, know your mission. What is it that you want to do? And use that communication template, strategy template that we just looked at a few slides ago. What is your current state? What is your desired state? Right? Or what is the problem that you're trying to solve? The problem that I'm trying to solve is trying to get this company that was thinking and behaving like a transporter to someone who is more customer focused and is looking at it from the express model, or the customer delivery model. Okay, so know your mission. Map your environment, internal and external. Within your organization, what are the capabilities you have? What are the challenges you have? You do a SWOT analysis for your company. Look at your environment. Who are your competitors? What are your competitors doing? And also, why is this company wanting to move from the traditional trucking business to the express model or to the TruckX model? Because customers' expectations have changed, right? So customers' expectations have changed. Those who have experienced the service on, say, a Flipkart or an Amazon, start expecting similar types of experiences from other transporters or other logistic companies as well, right? So map the environment inside and out. Define your future state, right? Define your future state. What, a year from now, 2 years from now, or whenever, what will my company look like? What will the transport experience look like? Right? What will my office look like? How will I receive my customer? How will I take the customer's consignment? How will I process the consignment? How will I transport it? How will I take care of the delivery end of this particular consignment? Right? So envision the future. Create short, medium, and long term scenarios. So within 3 months, how do I think this will work out? Within 6 months, how do I think it'll work out? Within a year or 2 years or 10 years, how will it look like? Okay. Identify illustrative stories of a future state. So what this illustrative story is similar to that architectural video or drawing that your builder probably is going to show you, right? So those of you who've been fortunate enough to buy a house or buy an apartment or build a house or build an apartment, whatever, right? So the architect's drawing, the architect's video is the story. What will the walkway look like? What is the experience of you entering the gate, the doorway? Which room is on your left? Where is your bathroom, and where is the living space? Where will the kids be? Where is your garden? Where's your balcony? Use that as the analogy over there, right? So illustrative stories of the future state. The customer is going to be satisfied because his consignment will be delivered at the time we promise that we will deliver the consignment. The customer is going to remain with us because we offer a better experience than the competitors, right? So illustrative stories define the future state. Assess your present state. you know what is your organization's culture? What are the capabilities within the organization? And the leadership, what does the leadership pool look like? What kind of competencies do they have? What kind of training do they have? What kind of experiences do they have? you know Organizational capabilities. Do I have the technology? Do I have the know-how? Am I What kind of training have my people received? What are their education levels? Everything, right? So assess your present state. Then conduct a gap analysis, right? So you look at what your current state is, what your future state is, and what is the gap that needs to be met. What is the gap that needs to be met on various aspects, in terms of culture, in terms of values, in terms of behaviors, in terms of the capabilities, right? So over here, what you need to do is pull out McKinsey's 7S framework. I hope you remember McKinsey's 7S framework, right? So the hard S's and the soft S's: strategy, structure, system, staff, skill, style, and shared values, right? So on all seven of those aspects, what is the gap that needs to be met between your current and your future state? Okay. Now, these are all things that you will have to do. Then plan the transition. All right, so now I have all this information. I have to start planning for implementation, for the transition process. What is my strategy going to be? What are the activities that I will engage in? What are the processes that I will have to do, put in place? What kind of commitment should I get from people? What kind of commitment should I show? Who will be responsible for doing what? What will be the mechanism for ensuring accountability? Who will lead this particular process? Uh, what are the resources I have in hand? How will I measure success? What are the milestones? What's my communication strategy and the feedback mechanisms? What are my contingency plans? And also see if I can envision what are some unintended consequences of what I'm going to be doing, right? So planning the transition, putting things in place, and then implementing the plan. Implementing the plan, uh, what you'll communicate, how you will support the people when the implementation is going on, and what sort of leadership will be provided during the implementation of the plan. Monitor, measure, review, and adjust, right? So adjust, because there is, like we said, there is no ideal situation that you will ever find. There is always going to be some problem or the other. So let's go back to our trucking company. What we did was, so we first received, as a consultant, someone from the organization reached out to us and shared with us their problem, right? So this is what we want to do. Although they weren't very clear about what they wanted to do when they first approached us. So the clarity emerged after several meetings with some of their top leaders. So the initial phase is knowing the mission for us from the consultant standpoint. And you, if your CEO is giving you this project to do, is to go and understand the mission. So we went and met people in the organization at various levels to get a sense of the company. Uh, we did a little pilot sort of study with a set of questions drawn from the guide that you've just seen. Uh, Not exactly these questions, but questions that were relevant for that particular organization. Uh, We gathered a lot of background information, and uh, met people several times in order to ensure that we understand exactly what they have in mind, and also to clarify for them what their problem is, right? So uh, when you're dealing with a situation like this, and especially when your leader or your CEO comes and tells you something, you have to you have to look out for two things. One is what is called a presenting problem, right? So think of it as like you're going to the doctor. You go to the doctor and you tell him, I have a headache, right? Because that is what you have. You have a headache. So that is your presenting problem. The presenting problem is the headache. And then the doctor asks you a lot of questions, uh, because the doctor needs to find out why is this headache coming to you, right? And headaches can happen for a variety of reasons. It could simply be something like you're stressed, or you haven't eaten that day, you're constipated, you've been out in the sun, you're working on something really challenging, uh, or there could be uh, some actual physical ailment. You could have a tumor in your head, you could have a clot in the head, whatever. So it's the doctor's job to then diagnose and kind of tease out what the actual problem is, right? So that is what you do in the beginning when you are trying to learn what the mission is, which is what is the problem, what is the problem that the organization is telling me they have, but what is the actual problem, right? So that is the process of doing some digging. You have to dig in a little bit, ask questions, uh, in a way that people will tell you, share with you, and then you start making sense of what the problem is. And then what we did was we put a team together. We we uh, uh, we, we put a team of the department heads, because they will be the ones who will drive the change or be the face of the change for their particular department. Now you will need to have that kind of commitment and buy-in if you want to drive organization change. If the top management or the leaders are not involved or seen to be driving the change, the likelihood of that change succeeding is going to be very low, right? So we brought in all the department heads, and so they became the change management team, right? So they would be the ones who would discuss all the other aspects of this sequence of events. So they will be the ones who will identify will clarify what their future state is. They will be the ones who will assess their present state. We will help them, figure out and do the gap analysis for them, and do all the transition planning activities. But it is the team within that organization that will do all of these particular things, right? So once the change management team puts all these things in place, you start creating plans for every type of event that you are planning to do. Particularly, again, you will look at the McKinsey 7S framework. What are the kind of changes you will need to make in each of those seven components? Because if you recall our discussion about the 7S model, it is that you can't make a change in one of the components and expect it to happen in isolation. That is not going to happen. Any change in any one of the components will have implications or impact or effect on the other components as well. So it is important for you to have a plan for each of those different components. So if I'm moving in our particular case example, if I'm moving from a traditional trucking company to a new age trucking company which is more customer focused, what how will my business strategy change? What kind of organization structure should I have, right? So this organization structure, just to give you an example, will have to change from a hierarchical model to a more empowered model where uh, an employee, even at the lower levels, should be empowered to make certain decisions in the interest of the business and the in the interest of serving the customer. What kind of systems should I have in place? Systems can be everything from what kind of technology I need to have, information technology, other technologies, say something as simple as having barcodes, to scan, uh, QR codes, uh, scanning machines, uh, RFID chips, whatever it is, like whatever technology is required to make the move from a traditional trucking business to the new age trucking business. Uh, what kind of people should I have? You know, I have to upgrade their skills because they have to learn new ways of behaving now, right? So earlier they thought they were doing the customer a favor by taking the package, but now that has flipped. The customer is doing them a favor by doing business with this particular company. What are the skill set they should have? What is the style of leadership that needs to be in place? Everything has to be identified one by one, right? Now, one of the things that we also did during this process is, if you recall, when we were discussing change, individual change, we said individuals will have to change at three levels. One is in their behavior, second is in the cognition, which is what do they know, and third is the attitudes and beliefs, right? So the values. And we said relatively behaviors are easier to change. The next is the cognition aspect or the knowledge aspect, and the third one is the attitude or the values aspect, right? So we start identifying what are the behaviors, because that's the easier one to deal with. What are the behaviors that we will need to see in the new type of organization, right? How will a sales representative have to behave? How will the manager have to behave? How will the zonal manager have to behave? How will the department head will have to behave? uh, what kind of behavior should the warehouse manager have? What kind of behavior should the truck driver have? What kind of behavior should the truck driver's assistant have? What kind of behavior should the department heads? What kind of behavior should the CEO have? You have to identify all of them, and this is something that we've identified. And then you start putting the plan in place. So how do we communicate all of this to these people? So some of them we would communicate through workshops and training programs. Some we would communicate through video messages. Some we would communicate through certain apps that would be developed for this particular purpose. For some people, they will have an opportunity to test out some of the changes to ensure that they know how to do things. Even something as simple as how do you stack boxes, right? In the earlier model, people would just throw the boxes one on top of each other. But now, to ensure that there is fewer or zero breakages or damage to the package, you have machinery that will tools that will help you pack better, stack better, and transport better, right? So you have all these things in place, and then you roll out your implementation plan. So which is, you go to different places, talk to people, uh, put them through workshops, give them some opportunities to test drive, so to say, the new system. And as that is happening, you monitor, review what is going on, and make adjustments so that things are going the way you want them to go, right? So this is the broad general sequence of events that you'll need to keep in mind when you start undertaking any change initiative in the organization. So let me stop for a sec and see if you have any questions. If you'd like me to go back to something, I'd be happy to do that. Explain something, I'd be happy to do that. Please unmute yourself or use the chat feature to post your questions or your comments.
Hi, Ajay this side, sir.
Hi, Ajay.
So, sir, it was really a good way in which that you have explained all these things. It was very clear to understand.
Right.
And the general sequence of events that you have mentioned over here, it is mentioning the 9 steps which would be generally taking care of the entire change cycle from the beginning in the thought process to the actual implementation and adjusting it, right?
Correct.
So each and every step, I think, as per what you have said, is a detailed analysis or detailed thing in itself. Like knowing the mission, mapping the environment, or even defining the future, planning the transition. Everything is a very detailed thing, which we need to first of all find it out ourselves, and then only think about or uh, plan these kind of things initially, and then only go ahead with the change. Right?
That is correct. Yes. Right.
Okay.
So, and there's a reason for that, because when you are not sure about how this will play out, what happens if you start talking about it in the general public is, uh, you know, people get half the information or part of the information, and then if that information somehow seems to threaten their existence in their job or their department or their function, things start kind of becoming messy in the organization. So before you embark on any change, the leaders have to be clear about what they want, right? So uh, you have to maintain a lot of secrecy or confidentiality in the beginning stages. Yes. This
Okay.
becomes actually even more acute. Say, uh, I studied mergers and acquisitions for my doctoral in my doctoral dissertation. So I kind of studied mergers and acquisitions. The When that merger or acquisition is being conceptualized or the preparation is going on, right? The background
Mm,
preparation goes on
mm.
for the buying another organization, merging with another organization. There is a lot of secrecy. Very few people get to know about it. Uh,
Yeah, true,
Decision
sir.
make, right? Very few people get to know about it, and they are sworn to secrecy. They have confidentiality agreements, NDAs, and the threat of lawsuits and whole bunch of things if they go and leak the information, because there are,
Correct.
if it's a publicly listed company, any rumor or news has an impact on the share price. And usually the merger or acquisition, the cost of the merger or acquisition is pegged to the share price, right? So either it can be an all cash buyout, or it can be cash, partly stock, or an all stock transaction, whatever it is. uh, any change or communication of change can impact the share price, and that is something that companies pay very careful attention to. Okay. So
Yeah.
there is a lot of secrecy that needs to be maintained in the beginning, simply because when you yourself are not clear about it, you can't talk about it openly. After you've conceptualized it, after you have a good handle, right, of the situation, what the change is, what it entails, what the end state looks like. When you feel confident that you can communicate it clearly is when it goes out to the public.
Yeah, correct, sir.
Yeah.
In basically in the pharma industry, this happens merger and acquisitions like Ranbaxy, Daiichi Sankyo, and all those things.
Right.
So at that point of time, sir, we have lived those things and we have seen how the information is not given outside, and then how the information is shared, when the information is shared, and to whom the information is shared. All those things really matter. And
Correct.
most importantly, the way that it is shared, so that it is not threatening the existence, it is not making a panic in the entire employee segment or the market area as such. So
Correct.
those things are really important.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Please call me Ted, Sanjeev.
Mr. Ted, good evening. Ted, I was just trying to correlate this entire change process to what's happening right now in our country. So I'm not sure whether I'm right or not, but the current protest of farmers, I'm not too
Right,
sure whether I could correlate, but there's a question coming in my mind.
right,
Um, over the last decade or 15 years, this change has been thought by many other political parties. It has been communicated in their mission statements, in their election manifestos. A right environment has been built up. So, can first my question uh, is it only limited to organizations, or when we call it a nation as a whole, we're trying to bring a very big change, which is also going to relate to some kind of agricultural reforms, and thereby inducing something to do with the money here and also business. So, could we relate these two things, and what went wrong just by your experience? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question, Sanjeev. All right, so yes, see the principles or the fundamental concepts of a change uh, can be applied at different levels. Individual, so we looked at the Kurt Lewin model at the individual level. We're looking at the John Cotter model at the organization level. There is nothing that should stop you from, uh, taking it to the next level of a state or a country, as long as conceptually you're aware that in extrapolating you will have to be careful in doing that because the different levels have their own different challenges. The contexts are very different. So you can definitely extend these ideas of change at the national level as well. So you can use these frameworks to understand the protests that are going on, but for just to be careful that I don't overstep the remit of this particular program that I'm in, I would not want to comment on the political aspects of it because that's outside the syllabus, so to say. But please feel free to use this framework to understand what is going on outside as well. That's and so I will not be able to answer your question about what has gone wrong because that is outside the what you say, the scope of this particular session, right? Okay.
So if I
But you
keep the
can
politics
definitely use
out,
the you can definitely use this framework to understand what is going on at the national level as well.
only thinking if tomorrow I am in the place of making a change for the country in that level, uh, and I have to bring something. So I feel that the part of communication which you have discussed very heavily in your lecture today, I think that communication part somewhere down to the line of farmers, if that process can happen first and then the bills are passed. So I'm sure what we are doing today, we should have done earlier, and then I think that communication part, if it's very strong earlier and the feedback part is very strong, things may not go wrong. Minus, of course, keeping politics aside totally.
Yeah, I'm trying not to kind of get pulled into that discussion
Yes,
for
just
obvious reasons,
change.
Sanjeev, because simply because this is not the forum for it. And I mean, if it
I'll
was
got
if
it.
this was an in-class program, right, I would have been able to carve out some time and discuss
Yeah,
this maybe
yeah.
outside of the
Thanks, thanks,
session.
thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks, Dad.
but you
Yeah,
get
I
the
got
larger
it. I got it.
picture, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Any
Thanks.
any other questions, folks? Thanks for those questions. I mean, it's a good question in terms of the applicability of these models, right? Yeah.
Ted, Ajay this side.
Yes, Ajay.
Uh, Ted, I was wondering, I don't know how much I am correct, how much I am wrong, or whatever, because as a student or as a person who is learning about the change, how really you compare kind of learning and development atmosphere that we have in India and the kind of learning and development that is available outside India, the kind of hubs like ATD, I have heard a lot about them, and similar
What is
kind of
that?
different
Say, could you
platforms.
repeat that? What is that? AT?
ATD, ATD.
What is ATD? Could you expand that for me, please?
I just don't remember what is ATD right now, because ATD is a platform which is a learning hub similar to kind of a professional training institute which is giving education or training to the trainers, that kind of thing.
Acha, okay. I'm sorry, I'm not aware of it, but go ahead. Go ahead with your question.
So my question is that similar kind of institutions or similar kind of platforms which are available worldwide, I'm sure that you might be aware of something else than ATD. So comparing to that and comparing to the kind of ISTD that we are having here in India, how do you envision or how do you say what could be the better future for the kind of the role that ISTD is playing towards developing new trainees or new L&D environment, and how we can improve for the future? Is it the organization that needs to?
Ajay, I'm just going to kind of hold you
Yeah.
back there. Again, this is a little out of the scope of this particular course, because you're asking me about what ISTD can do. I mean, those are
No, not you, sir. I
bigger
am thinking of a
questions
change,
which
sir.
no, I
Sir,
understand. See, that is an application sort of question, which I think like I would challenge you to try and find the answer based on what we have looked at in the program so far, right? Based on so you see if you can kind of try and
yeah,
answer
sir,
that for yourself.
I'm not having the other side of the window, so I have only the experience of an ISTD, so I know only
ISTD.
ISTD.
Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, okay, so
So I was
Ashish
thinking
just
of getting some
clarified
expert
that.
opinion from you, sir.
Ashish just clarified that ATD is was formerly ASTD, which is the American counterpart of ISTD. Uh,
Yeah.
see, one of the things that I can kind of at least safely say
Hmm.
is in the last couple of decades, there's been a lot of what you say. Mixing or like learning that people do across cultures and across countries, right? uh, Even in India, because for the last 20 odd years we've had a lot of multinational companies, American companies working in India, people traveling between the two countries. A lot of things have become common to let me not say a lot of things, fairly good number of things have become common. So there's even the content that you're being exposed to in ISTD is similar to some extent to the content that people would have in ATD. Of course, the infrastructure and availability in that context is in that country is going to be slightly different. But in terms of content nowadays, people have access, right? uh, they have access to a lot of things, and information technology allows for learning across countries fairly easily now. So I wouldn't be too concerned that people in ATD are learning something phenomenally different from what ISTD is offering. uh, I mean, again, I don't want to comment on because I don't have complete information to be able to give you an answer about where ISTD compares with vis-a-vis ATD. So I'm so sorry. I will not be able to
No, sir.
fully answer that question.
I just wanted to have a fair idea that how ISTD is perceived, how the present state of affairs is, because the thing that you were explaining in the entire slide, I was trying to relate it with ISTD, the kind of present environment, how we can grow in the future along with ISTD, because I also dream to becoming an ISTDian and growing in my career along with the kind
Right.
of growth that happens with ISTD also. So how effectively the organizations outside ISTD who are recruiting these kind of people will be looking positively towards the students of ISTD? That is really a thing that is coming into my
Yeah.
mind.
I'm so sorry. I simply don't have enough information to be able to answer that question for you. Yeah. Maybe I will, I'll check with one of the persons at ISCD, and maybe they can answer that question for you next week. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. So we have 1 minute left. Uh, what I'll do is I'll just kind of like quickly go to the next slide, which is, uh, you know, this is a program on organization development and change, and we've talked about change extensively, right? Uh, but what I want you to kind of see is that we needed that foundational grounding to be good so that we can understand OD, right? So OD, the definition of OD is that it is one form of organization change. So if you understand organization change in general, then OD becomes fairly relatively easier to understand, because it is just is one type, it's a subset of organization change. So the sequence that we've learned, the models that we've learned, the questions that we've asked, the fundamental questions that we've asked, they all kind of will apply to OD as well. So this definition is from Burke and Bradford. OD is a form of organization change. It is planned. Again, it is not unplanned. So it's not a reaction. You can see that it is already, mimicking the definition for organization change we looked at the beginning. It is planned change that focuses on all levels of organization, relies primarily on the application of behavioral sciences rather than industrial engineering, right? So it's more behavioral sciences oriented, which means OD focuses more on people rather than everything else. So when you talk about organization change, you can also talk about organization change in terms of changing a particular system, changing a particular machinery, to changing a certain equipment, or changing business processes. That's a broader understanding of organization change. OD is more people focused, so it derives from behavioral sciences to the adaptive development, improvement, reinforcement of the people and culture. So it's more people focused, more development focused for the people.
Yeah,
So
Ted,
this is yes,
sorry to interrupt you.
right.
See, one of the question in the assignment is basically what are the OD interventions you would recommend for your organization or other organization to strengthen team building among the workforce across departments.
Right.
So I was just hoping that if you look at this question, if you could give us few pointers that we should ensure that we have in this particular question. And the second question is, describe the role you as a trainer will play to manage the change of performance management system in your organization.
All right. So, Neelam, could you kind of hold on to that question for the next session, because we look at OD in a little more detail next session.
Correct. Okay.
Okay.
No
Because
worries.
we're also running out of time, and I just want to make sure that others, may have other things to do as well. So hold on to the question. Ask me first thing next week, and then we will go through that. Right.
Yes, because I really want
Today,
to these
yeah,
assignments.
I got it. Right. Today, I just wanted to introduce you to this idea of OD as one form of organization change. Again, with like how we talked about organization change, there are many definitions of OD, but the ASTD's definition, or the American Training and Development ATD's definition, which is actually from the reading assigned to you from OD principles and processes, is this, right? So this is how the American ASTD defines OD. Similar to Burke's, they have basically borrowed it from Burke's definition, which is it has to be aligned with the business objectives, rooted in behavioral sciences. It's long range, ongoing, uh, process oriented, based on collaboration, and systems oriented. Uh, Basically, it is theory O of your organization change. If you remember with the slide on why organizations change, we looked at one of the ways to look at it is theory E, which is the economic angle, or the economic reasons for change. The other one, theory O, which is Noria and Beer and Noria's model. Uh, Theory O is building organization capability. So OD focuses on building organization capabilities. Right. So what we'll do next week is we'll continue with OD. We'll wrap up OD, and then we will bring everything together, uh, and then wrap it up. So next week is going to be the final session. I hope all of you can join in on time. I'm apologize for taking 4 extra minutes today. So next week, if we start exactly at 6, we should be able to wrap up by 7:30. All right. So with that, let me wrap it up. Hold on to any of your questions, and what I will do is I will post this particular slide deck to the Google Drive. Make sure you access them, and also please read that assigned reading so that you come prepared for next week's session, which is the final session. So it's important if you can be there. All right. So with that, let me wrap up and say good night, everyone. Have a great week. I will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.